Branding is a practice that's been used since 2700 BC by ancient Egyptians as a theft deterrent. 4,700 years later, we're still using this outdated and inhumane technique that is not caught up with the technology of our time. Despite the necessity of branding and its benefits to preventing theft, it can be a stressful event for both livestock and producers alike. Branding livestock puts animal health in jeopardy, leaving the animal with painful wounds and a higher than normal body temperature. With many alternatives to livestock branding known and accepted across the world, this inhumane practice should not be permissible. It is time to advance our morals and eliminate the branding methods that are still being used.
So branding may not be one of the finer parts of cattle production, but it is a necessity to many producers. Although we like to think we live in a time where cattle theft is no longer an issue, it still happens regularly across Canada. Canadian Cattlemen's reports that approximately 600 cattle are stolen each year. Whether it's intentional theft or accidental due to cattle getting out and into someone else's herd, brands are one of the best methods to ensure your cattle get safely back to you. We do agree with you that branding is a painful procedure, and no farmer wakes up and is excited to inflict pain on their livestock, but they do what is necessary for the safety of the animals and for the safety of the people. Traceability is a huge priority in Canadian cattle. RFID tags are part of this, but when those fall out, a brand can always be relied upon. Branding causes temporary pain that lasts a short portion of the animal's life. Branding has been debated and agreed upon in the Code of Practice, meaning it is termed an ethical way of identifying cattle and is one of the only permanent ways of identifying cattle.
Both hot iron and freeze branding techniques are capable of causing pain, indicated by behavior responses such as tail flicks, kicks, vocalization, heart rate increase, and cortisol responses. That is observed in several studies. Handling techniques can minimize the stress the livestock go through, but does not help decrease the pain of the procedure.
The Code of Practice for Care and Handling of Farm Animals, Beef Cattle, written by the National Farm Care Council, realizes that producers identify their cattle is essential. While they advocate for the most pain-free method, they know that hot iron freezing or branding may need to be done. For the sake of animal welfare, if animals are sold, rebranding should not be done. Instead, as a more humane option, a bill of sale can be presented or some form of recorded ownership to prove the change in ownership.
So without using branding, how do you propose that identification is kept clear with ear tags, back tags, neck and tail changes, and paint marks all not guaranteed to last on the animal?
Livestock with, if you're only using ear tags, livestock with brands are able to be stolen, as well as livestock with ear tags. If a thief wants to remove an ear tag, they will be able to do it. The debate isn't about how to stop thieves on the farm, but rather the humane way of labeling cattle.
An evaluation of heat and freeze brand sites indicate that both methods cause inflammatory response, consistent with tissue damage and pain. Based on the prolonged inflammation observed in heat-branded animals, it is probable that heat branding causes a more intense and prolonged pain than freeze branding, but both end up harming the animal.
Freeze branding or hot branding do not cause long-term negative effects to the cattle. There's no evidence supporting that it will alter them gaining weight or to their immunity. If animals were uncomfortable for long periods of time, their appetite would decrease and weight loss would be expected. And 8 weeks isn't that much out of a 36-month lifespan.
20-month lifespan. You claim that branding is an outdated technology, but isn't the fact that we have used this method for so long proof that it is the only option that works?
even though branding has been such a big part of the cattle industry, there are many alternative methods that aren't so inhumane to the animals. Ear tags, back tags, tail tags, and that. All those alternatives would provide a much more humane way of labeling livestock without threatening the animal's health and well-being.
Do cattle handlers receive proper training to develop skills on how to perform the branding procedure in an environment that's safe and comfortable for the livestock?
Although technically there is no formal training, it's passed down generation to generation. There's no necessary class you have to take to handle livestock, but every farmer knows that a more comfortable, happy, less stressed out animal makes that farmer happier because that animal performs better.
In your research, you touched on that animal identification is an important management tool for livestock and an integral part of the federal disease control program. Why do you think improper identification that lasts a lifetime is an important factor to the federal disease control program? And what is an alternative to branding that could last a lifetime?
The USDA wants every cow to have a unique numerical ID electronically embedded into an ear tag to make it easier to track animals from the ranch to feedlots and the slaughterhouse. Then if a sick animal is found, the source of illness can be found and isolated within hours. And lucrative global markets like Japan are now demanding that meat be proven safe and traceable before entering the country.
If livestock branding is such a humane practice as being argued, why can a cow not be rebranded time and time again as they're changing hands?
Basically, because a brand lasts for a lifetime, it's documented that you don't need to necessarily change that brand every time the animal changes ownership because you can then document it with paper, make a paper trail to follow it. They have the animal's best interest in mind. They're doing the best they can with the methods they have available, which means a brand and then following with a paper trail.
Although no farmer wants to inflict pain on their cattle, do they want to be able to properly identify them and ensure their cattle remain in care? Do you think it would be more inhumane if cattle go out or were stolen and there was no way to identify where they properly belong? These unclaimed cattle would be at risk of not getting the proper care.
It has always been proven that ear tags are the least painful procedure for keeping track of your cattle. There are other ways to protect against theft, including visiting your livestock every day and counting heads, inspecting fences, and using different daily routines to prevent yourself from being a target of theft. Again, the debate isn't about how to stop these, but rather the humane way of the labeling of the cattle.
If herds of cattle are changing hands several times through their lives, what would be alternative then to hot branding? Hot iron brand the animals?
That's
The paper trail, I guess? Is that?
the brand is already on there. The alternative is what we're asking you for.
Medicine today has evolved from years ago. Although the pain and anti-inflammatory drugs don't last the duration of the healing process, farmers keep a close eye on their herd of cattle in order to reduce infection. Cattle are not neglected.
Microchip transponder injection induced less signs of pain and inflammation and did not seem to pose a higher long-term risk than hot iron branding. Consequently, results indicated that hot iron branding does inflict more pain and should be abandoned where possible.
Back to the point of technology and the advancement, is it, we see the changes going all around us. Why is a more technology-based labeling procedure not commonly used? It's out there, and it's a safer alternative to branding animals.
Sorry, can you what technology is it more commonly used?
Better labeling and branding, like instead of branding. Like microchip in cattle, for example.
So one of the main issues with other methods is there's nothing as easily identifiable as branding. Large numbers of cattle are going through sorting systems and options and for transportation, and to stop each animal and figure out what their identification is by scanning or checking a tattoo or a need for a tattoo would be similar to checking every kernel of corn that goes into production. It's not feasible. Consumers won't pay for the increased time for those methods.
So last question.
In your research, you had mentioned that the high heat from branding can catch fire if in contact with cattle's hair. What is the probability of cattle's hair catching fire while branding? And is it likely to happen in many operations and frequently?
We believe even if it happens once in a lifetime, it is still worse than it never happening to an animal. We consider both hot iron branding and freeze branding to inflict pain on an animal, and studies conclude that cattle show different levels of behavioral frequency after being both hot and freeze branded.
Closing statements.
We believe that cattle branding is a good option for producers to identify their cattle. Ultimately, this decision is left up to each individual. Reality is, cattle theft is still a regular occurrence across Canada. We believe that branding cattle one time only can help to reduce this. Canadians want safe beef, and to ensure that they can have peace of mind knowing that what they buy is safe for them to consume. This reassurance of being able to brand check helps to quickly ensure that common safety standards are being met. Although yes, branding can be a painful process for cattle and farmers, it is done for the greater good and end result. As earlier stated, no farmer wakes up wanting to inflict pain on an animal. If they choose to brand, they are choosing to do it because of the benefits they see available. It is a long-term, permanent solution that is a one-time process. In the Code of Practice, it has been deemed as an ethical way to identify cattle for years after it's done.
Livestock branding has had its use in the past, and it has served its purpose. But the time has come for progress, and the technologies that are now available could lead to branding to be completely obsolete. We understand that this may interfere with a strong sense of tradition with many livestock owners, but for the well-being of their animals, the brand could be set aside. Not only do branding techniques and practices leave pain and swelling on animal hide for upwards of 3 months, but the technique is virtually torture to a living animal. Livestock branding is a very inhumane practice and simply a threat to the well-being of any animal. Animal welfare should be considered when choosing a method of identification, and every effort should be made to use methods that cause minimal pain and distress for the animals.
Good. Good job.